Now I want to explain why the New York Times calls private equity banking the secret of the affluent. There are a number of reasons why private equity banking is so important to the affluent. First of all, it provides us with guarantees. Guarantees. You don't get that too many places out there with zero market risk. Also, our cash is liquid and there's no restrictions on when we can get to it. Think like a 401k. Also, it is tax-free growth. And you can borrow your money tax-free from these accounts also. And lastly, private equity banking accounts are protected from the volatility in the market as well as creditors, bankruptcy, etc. So who are some of these affluent? Well, obviously the Rockefellers, they've kept their dynasty going for over 100 years, right? The Rothschilds, they've used private equity banking. Also, the Morgans, 3 generations of the Morgan family have kept their generational wealth intact due to private equity banking. So have some of our presidents, Roosevelt and Kennedy, right? And then all of these companies here have used private equity banking to help them grow. So what is it that private equity banking does for us? Well, what it does is it protects us from some of the things that would destroy our generational wealth. First and foremost, debt service, right? Also, retirement instability is protected through private equity banking because we get guarantees, and so it doesn't really matter how the economy fluctuates, we have guarantees that protect us from an unstable economy. Also, as I stated earlier, these accounts grow tax-free, and so we don't have to worry about taxation in them ever again. And probably where a lot of Americans would use this is to protect against the volatility that they get in their 401ks or their IRAs. What does private equity banking give us? Well, it gives us first and foremost a good place to get out of debt. It also provides us with a place to grow and protect our money. Have a known versus an unknown future because of the contractual nature of these accounts. We get predictability and guarantees. We also have zero market risk, which for me brings peace of mind, especially at my age. And lastly, we're able to build tax-free generational wealth. But for most Americans, the place where they're going to first utilize a private equity banking account is to get out of debt. Let's think about that. What does America look like today? We've got student loans that are in the trillions, auto loans are in the trillions, credit cards are in the trillions, and now homes also nearing $10 trillion. So what's $1 trillion look like? Well, there's 100, there's 10,000. Did you know 1 million can fit in a suitcase? When you're talking about 100 million, now it fits on a pallet. 1 billion, that's what Jeff and Bill have, right? Now you're talking 10 pallets, but that is $1 trillion. 1,000 billion or 1,000,000 million. And again, the housing debt in America is right at $10 trillion. So a question that you might want to ask your clients is, if I could show you how to get out of all of your debt in 9 years or less, to include the mortgage, without spending any more than you're currently spending now, would you do it if you could? When I ask people that question, the resounding answer is yes. So let's talk about some of these one at a time. Debt service. Am I suggesting that using other people's money is wrong? I mean, I've already told you I'm a loan officer. Of course not. I understand the power of other people's money, right? In fact, 10, 15 years ago, Robert Kiyosaki and Stephen Covey started a financial coaching program, and I was one of their coaches. So I'm very familiar with what Robert Kiyosaki has to say about entrepreneurship. And obviously other people's money, or OPM, plays a part for most entrepreneurs. But the difference is, and this is something that I like about Robert Kiyosaki, is that he defined an asset as something that puts money in your pocket. And that's the rub. If you borrow money and it's not putting money in your pocket, in other words, there's no arbitrage, then guess what? It's a liability. But it's simple to turn that liability into an asset using private equity banking. So what the affluent have learned is how to use other people's money plus arbitrage. Here's some examples. Walt Disney, he could not get a loan for his theme park, so he used his private equity banking account to do it. Doris Christopher, right? The pampered chef. She borrowed money from her private equity banking account. What about J.C. Penney? Everybody knows that during the Depression, he kept his company alive. But how? He did it with his own private equity banking account. And probably the most famous of all of them, the gentleman that started McDonald's, Ray Kroc, right? They even talk about it in that movie that just came out about him a couple years ago, how he used his private equity banking account to expand his franchise concept. Okay, so debt service is one of them. Another one is the retirement gamble. PBS Frontline did an article, did a documentary in 2013 called The Retirement Gamble. In there, they begin this presentation by saying, one simple fact, America is facing a retirement crisis. Then Martin Smith says, half of all Americans say they cannot afford to save for retirement. A newscaster breaks in and says, the average American has lost over $12,000 in their retirement account. That's probably the 401k that we were talking about earlier. Martin Smith comes back on and says 1/3 of all Americans say they have next to zero retirement in savings. Are you or any of your clients dealing with this? So a question that you could ask them, are you 100% sure you're ready for a great retirement? And if not, private equity banking probably has a place in their life. What about the pension gamble? 5 years later, Frontline did a follow-on to the retirement gamble, and they called it the pension gamble. In there, they state, Frontline investigates the role that state governments and Wall Street had in driving America's public pensions into a multi-trillion-dollar hole. There's that trillion-dollar word, right? Martin Smith says, we're doing a show about the pension problem. You know, the teachers, the firemen, the cops, the people that work hard all day long and are worried that they aren't going to have a pension. Probably the most widely used arena for private equity banking to protect our generational wealth comes from market volatility. I saw an article the other day in Investopedia, and it was titled, We Cannot Control Everything. And then it said, although it is a must, due diligence cannot save you from everything. Think about that. Who could have predicted 9/11 or the 2008 housing bubble or COVID? And each time the market does one of these uncontrollable dips, people lose thousands and tens of thousands of dollars in their 401ks and in their market products. And so uncertainty in the markets is one of the places where private equity banking can help us the most. So one of the questions that I like to ask is how much of your financial security depends upon people or companies or economic systems that you can neither predict nor control? Now, am I saying that you shouldn't have anything out there in a risky environment? No. What I'm asking is what percentage of your financial security is in that type of an environment. And obviously, if you're 25 or 35 or 45 or 55 or 65, that is going to change. But it's a question that we all should ask ourselves, right? And then the follow-on question to that is, how much of your financial security comes with guarantees? This is a cash accumulation contract, and that contract gives you guarantees. That's what brings peace of mind when you start getting up in my age bracket. The next one, the 401k problem. We've touched on it just a little bit. I'm not going to go super in depth on this, but John Wasik is one of the writers for Forbes. And he wrote an article a little bit ago called Why 401ks Have Failed. And he quotes Professor Teresa Ghilarducci as saying that the 401k was an experiment and it has failed. And you say, so why is he quoting her? Who cares? Guess what? She helped create the 401k. She knows it was an experiment and she also knows it's failed. She's written a book out there that's pretty good. It's called When I'm 64. I'd suggest you read it. But if you really want to understand why the 401k is not a good idea, go read Pirates of Manhattan. That's an even better book. So in my mind, the reason a 401k doesn't work is one, it's uncontrollable, it's unpredictable, and it has age restrictions. So a question for you or your clients, are you happy with your 401k? Remember, this is the very question that Mike asked me, or asked all of us, that started this entire dialogue. He wasn't happy with the 401k he was offering to his employees, and that's what began this. So really the question I have in my mind is, why live with uncertainty when certainty is possible? So let's discuss now the solution.